Before we start the design process for a responsive website, let's explore what responsive design is. We'll also discuss why websites should be responsive and why it's good for UX designers to have responsive website designs in their portfolio. You may remember from earlier in the program that responsive web design allows a website to change automatically depending on the size of the device. Responsive websites will appear smaller to fit smaller screens like mobile phones, and will appear larger to fit larger screens like desktop computers. Responsive web design often involves more than changing the size of a website. When planning a website design, UX designers need to consider how the elements on each page will respond to different screen sizes. A smaller screen means less space. A responsive website might change where elements appear. For example, a desktop version of a website might list its popular pages along the top of the screen. A mobile version of the site won't have as much space at the top, so these popular pages may be grouped inside a hamburger menu instead. Designing multiple versions of the same website can take more time, but it ensures people are able to use the website on any device. In 2019, a Pew Research Center study found that 74% of adults in the US owned a desktop or laptop computer, and 81% owned a smartphone. With this data, you can assume your website's users are likely to access it from many device types. Designing your website for multiple device types is a great way to make sure anyone who wants to use your website can. Users need to be able to interact with website content in similar ways, regardless of a device's viewing size. Let's use a bank website as an example. It's important for me as a user to be able to see how much money is in my checking account, even if I'm not near a computer and can only use my mobile phone. Changing my device and still being able to access my bank info makes me feel like my needs are being met as a user. Highlighting your understanding of responsive web design is a fantastic way to make your portfolio attractive to potential employers. Designing responsive websites is a common and useful task for UX designers, and here's why. A study from 2019 found that there were over 185 million active websites on the internet, and more websites are created every second. That's a huge number. With so many active websites, the rate at which more websites are being created, and the number of people with mobile phones, there's a big market for professionals who can design websites that are easy to use on any device. In other words, lots of businesses need responsive websites. In a survey of over 900 UX designers, 90% reported that they had recently worked on a website or web-based application, and 76% had recently worked on a mobile app. This statistic tells us that while designing mobile apps is important work for UX designers, employers will likely ask you to design web-based projects as well. By having experience in responsive web design in your portfolio, employers know you can manage the job. Now that we've learned more about what responsive web design is, why it's important, and how your portfolio can benefit from including a responsive website project, we're going to explore a new tool that you'll use to design a responsive website in this course, Adobe XD. Let's start exploring how to use Adobe XD together. Adobe XD allows you to create wireframes, mockups, and prototypes for digital products like websites and mobile apps. In this course, we'll use XD as we design a responsive website. At this point in the certificate program, you might be thinking, hang on, this sounds like Figma. Do I really need to learn another design tool? Well, in short, yes. Some companies might prefer one design tool over another, so you might not always have the choice of which tool to use. Knowing how to design and build prototypes with multiple tools can broaden your UX knowledge and qualifies you for more job postings. By the time you finish this certificate program, we want to make sure you can apply to as many job opportunities as possible. Eventually, you'll develop a preference for a certain design tool like Figma or Adobe XD or others, but you won't know which tool you prefer until you give some of them a try. In addition, knowing more than one tool helps you stay nimble. In the field of UX design, the tools we use change rapidly, so you need to be adaptable. The more tools you know, the easier it is to switch gears when needed. Like Figma, Adobe XD has its own unique features and benefits. For one, Adobe programs and services work well together. For example, a file created in Adobe Illustrator can easily be imported into Adobe XD, which makes your design process seamless. In addition, sharing in Adobe XD is easy. It can be done right from your artboards. You can generate web links that anyone can use to preview your designs or prototypes, and get feedback directly on your artboards. There's also built-in user testing mode that allows users to test your designs. And Adobe XD is built to work collaboratively with other users. This is great for end-to-end production for design teams. Adobe XD has both free and paid plans, but for this certificate program, you'll use the XD Starter Plan, which is free for everyone. One thing to keep in mind, if you are taking this course on a Chromebook, you'll need to complete your project for this course in Figma instead of Adobe XD, because unfortunately, Adobe XD is not compatible with Chromebooks. If this is the case for you, there'll be optional readings that follow each Adobe XD demonstration video with guidance specific to Figma. It's time to get started with creating designs in Adobe XD. Throughout this course, you'll design a fully functional responsive website. To demonstrate each step of the process, I'll be designing a responsive website for a local library. The website will include a search function, a catalogue of materials, and the ability to reserve a book. We'll get into more details later on, but for now, let's open up XD and start familiarizing ourselves with the program. When you first open XD, you'll be greeted by the welcome screen. The welcome screen gives you the option to select the size of the device you want to design for, like a phone or a website. These sizes are shown in pixels. I'm going to focus on the website options since we'll be designing a website in this course. If you want to change the size of your web layout, you can click the drop-down menu here. But I'll leave this at 1920 by 1080 pixels for now. The number 1920 represents the screen resolution in pixels. I'm going to double-click the website tool to select this option. Now let's check out the main UI of Adobe XD. At the top of the screen, we have tabs like Design, Prototype, and Share. Clicking these words will switch you between the two work modes in Adobe XD, building your designs or creating your prototype. On the left side of the screen are the toolbox and the panel for libraries, layers, or plugins. In the middle of the screen is the canvas where you'll create your designs. And finally, on the right side of the screen is the property inspector. I know this seems like a lot, but fear not, we'll break down each of these areas in the coming videos. For now, let's stay on the Design tab. This grey area is called the canvas and will house all of your artboards. We already have an artboard for a website, but let's add another so you can get a feel for the process. To add an artboard to your work surface, select the Artboard tool from the tool palette on the left. It's the icon above the magnifying glass that looks like a piece of paper with a folded corner. When I click this tool, notice how the panel on the right side changes and displays a list of artboards to choose from. I'm going to select Web 1920 again because I want my screen size and resolution to remain the same while I design different pages of my website. If I continue to click on the canvas, it will automatically add more artboards in the size I've selected. But I don't need any more artboards right now, so I'm going to go back to my toolbar on the left and choose the Selection tool, which looks like the pointer on a computer mouse arrow. Now that I've added more artboards, I'll create a quick heading for the library website. On the left, I'll find the toolbox tools I can use to design the artboards. The top tool, which is a selection tool, will allow me to select and move entire artboards or individual elements in the artboards. The rectangle, ellipse, line, pen, and text tools can be used to create the designs on your artboard. The magnifying glass at the bottom will increase the size of my artboard. I'll use the magnifying glass to zoom in. Okay, now I'll select the text tool and create a heading on the artboard. I'll type in Wisconsin County Library. Because I just added a text box to the artboard, a list of options appeared in the property inspector on the right. These options are for the alignment types, transform tools, and the text appearances. Since the text I added is too small to be a heading at the top of a website, I'll use the font appearance option to make the text bigger. For example, I might change the font size from 20 to 100. I also want to move the text towards the top of the page in the middle by dragging the text box. To do that, I'll select my Selection tool to the left with my mouse and then drag the text box. Next, I'll add a square to represent the library's logo. To do this, I'll go to the toolbox on the left side of the screen and select the Rectangle tool. As you might remember from working in Figma, if you want to draw a perfect equal square, you can hold down the Shift key whilst you draw the shape. The same pro tip works here in Adobe XD too. Let's imagine the library we're designing this website for wants to put all of the recent book releases front and center on the homepage. So I'll draw a placeholder for a book using the Rectangle tool again, and I'll give it a title using the Text tool. Awesome, now I have some assets on my artboard. Now I want to align the content using a layout grid. As a refresher, a layout grid is a series of columns and gutters that allow you to organize elements in a design. Remember using a layout grid earlier in the program when you worked in Figma? This is similar in Adobe XD. I'll navigate to the toolbox on the left side of my screen and choose the selection tool. Now I can double-click on my artboard to select it. I know it's selected as a blue line appears around the outside of the artboard. After I select my artboard, the right side panel will change, and at the bottom a section called Grid appears. I'm going to select the checkbox in this section. Alright, if I go back to the right side of the screen, I'll have a whole new list of options to work with. These allow me to customize the grid columns. I can adjust everything from the color of the columns to the spacing between columns and more. I'll play with these a bit so you can understand how they work. For example, I can change the color of the columns to purple by clicking on the checkered box beside the word column here. I can also change the number of columns from 12 to 14. And here's a pro tip. When you select the layout grid, Adobe XD will automatically populate a number of columns depending on the size of your artboard. For large artboards, like the desktop computer I'm using, it'll automatically create 12 columns. Generally, the smaller the screen size is, the fewer columns there will be. Next, I can change the gutter width. You might remember gutters from the last course when we worked in Figma. In Figma, the space between the columns were called alleys. Gutters and alleys are the same. They just have different names and different tools. Gutters separate the content you'll add to your designs. For responsive web design, which is the focus of this course, gutter width can change at different breakpoints, which are the cutoff points that define sizes for different screens. Adobe XD will also automatically calculate gutters based on the size of the artboard you created. In this case, the default gutter size is 16. I'll change this from 16 to 10 to show you how it's done. Last but not least, let's check out margins. Margins are the distance between the layout grid and the end of the artboard on all four sides. Let me share some inside scoop. You may want more space between the content and the ends of the artboard for a couple of reasons. One, because it creates negative space, which can define components on a page. Margins give content space to breathe. And two, margins can organize visual information by grouping items or images together. It helps users identify similar objects. By default, Adobe XD will show the left and right margins as customizable, which is the single value you see here. But I can change the margins for each of the four sides by selecting this icon here, which will reveal the four boxes that can be changed to your specifications. For example, if I want more space on the left side so I can put a navigation bar there, then I might increase the margin distance for that side only. I'll change that value on the left side to 250. Oh, that doesn't look quite right. You know, on second thoughts, I might adjust those settings later. I want to change the values back to the default values Adobe XD sets, but I can't remember what those values were. The good news is, I can select the Use Default button here to reset them all to 12 columns, 16 width gutter, 122 column width, and 140 margins. Cool. Now that I have these columns to help organize my design, I'll click the Selection tool and align some of the assets in the artboard. First, I'm going to center the title using the columns. Then, I'll do the same for the book placeholder and its title. And there you have it. I've created an artboard and assets with Adobe XD. Now that I've covered the basics of designing in Adobe XD, it's time for you to set up an artboard for your own design project and play around in XD for a bit. Before we start creating wireframes and prototypes for a website in Adobe XD, let's take some time to think about who we're designing for, our users. To design a website, we'll follow the design process. As you might remember, the first step in the design process is to empathize with users. If you've been taking the courses of the certificate program in order, this video will be a quick review of what you've already learned so far when it comes to empathy. If this is the first course of the program that you've taken, you might want to go back and revisit our earlier videos about empathizing with users before you proceed. Any concepts you might need to review in more detail are linked in the course reading. Let's get started. We always keep the user front and center when we design. One way that we can build great user experiences is to empathize with our users. Empathy is the ability to understand someone else's feelings or thoughts in a situation. Empathy is at the heart of the work we do as UX designers. As a UX designer, empathizing is your #1 superpower. Empathy helps you spot user problems, and solving these problems is the ultimate goal of UX design. One of the ways that we can better empathize with users is by creating an empathy map. An empathy map is an easily understood chart that explains everything designers have learned about a user. Empathy maps have 4 squares that address what a particular user says, thinks, does, and feels. So let's think about the library website. Imagine we've already conducted a few interviews with potential users. Now it's time to put together an empathy map for one of them, Lorena. Here's what that map might include. In the Says square, we'll use a quote that Lorena gave us during their interview. "I wish the library made it easier for me to access all the newest mystery releases." In the Think square, we'll note that Lorena was smiling and leaning forward as they spoke. It was clear that they are passionate about books and care deeply about accessing them. In the Does square, we'll list one of the things that Lorena has done to try and check out a book at the library. They dropped by the library in the late afternoon to look for new books to check out after school is finished for the day. In the Feels square, we'll list the questions we asked Lorena during the interview and the words they attributed with their experience. We asked, "How did you feel when you found out the library didn't have your book?" And Lorena responded that they felt frustrated and annoyed. So why are empathy maps important? Well, empathy maps help us get into the user's mindset, which allows us to better identify their pain points. Pain points are any UX issues that frustrate the user and block them from getting what they need. Have you ever struggled to break the vacuum seal on an unopened jar of jam? That's an example of a pain point. The jar's design is blocking you from getting to the tasty jam inside. There are 4 categories that pain points can fall into: financial or money-related pain points, product, which are pain points related to quality issues, process, which are pain points related to the user's journey, and support, which are pain points related to getting help from customer service. Identifying the pain points your user is experiencing will help you find potential problems that your design can solve. And this has great value for users and your brand. In fact, Google's mantra is, focus on the users and everything else will follow. Now that we know Lorena and their needs, we can identify their pain points. The first pain point is that Lorena can't access the library outside of operating hours. That pain point falls into the product category, because the library is considered the product and the user, Lorena, is having an issue using the product. The second pain point is that Lorena can only check out books from the library in person. This pain point falls into the process category because Lorena cannot get from point A to point B in the user journey. For example, Lorena found out the library did not have their book after commuting to the library. Understanding your user's needs, and more specifically their pain points, informs your entire design process and makes your product design invaluable. As you move forward in this course and in your first job as a UX designer, be sure to always keep users and their needs top of mind. Coming up, we'll continue to empathize with our users by creating personas. Now that we've refreshed our knowledge of empathy maps and user pain points, let's review how to develop personas. You might remember this from earlier videos, but personas in UX design are fictional users whose goals and characteristics represent the needs of a larger group of users. Although personas are fictional representations of your users, they're based on very real research. They help you and your team stay focused on user needs. Personas are also one of the most effective ways to give a clear direction to your design solutions. Changing a persona can change what you'll design. Personas generally include a photo and a short biographical section that explains a user's age, education, hometown, family situation, occupation, and any other relevant info. So let's go back to the library website we're designing. Using the information that I learned from conducting user interviews, I'll create my first persona, Shane. Shane's persona will be created from a combination of interviews I conducted with different potential users of the library website. When you interview users, take notes of the time when several users state the same specific pain point, motivation, or need. You'll use this information to build a persona that is representative of the group of users you interviewed. So for my persona, I'll say Shane is 48 years old. They have a GED and live in Milwaukee, Wisconsin. They're married and work as a car mechanic. Shane works 60-hour weeks and finds it hard to reach the library before it closes at 5 p.m. They rely on the library as a source for new books. Shane, unfortunately, has recently begun experiencing symptoms of arthritis. Now that I've covered Shane's background info, I can focus on their needs as a library user. I'll note that Shane's goals are to be able to reserve books on their schedule, to have books that they want to read available when they arrive at the library, and to read more political thrillers. Shane feels frustrated at having to arrange their busy schedule to reach the library in time to check out books before it closes. By creating a persona, we're better able to tell the user's story, empathize with them, and eventually design a solution for them too. So think about Shane. They just want to be able to access the books they want when their schedule allows. But it seems like they keep hitting roadblocks. Let's see how we can help them with our product designs. After this quick refresher on personas, you can get to work creating personas for your own design project. Now that we've built out a persona for our library website project, it's time to create a user story. As a reminder, if this material feels unfamiliar to you, check out our earlier content on this topic that's linked in the reading that follows this video. Okay, before we actually build out a user story, let's quickly remember what a user story is. A user story is a fictional, one-sentence story told from a persona's point of view to inspire and inform design decisions. User stories deepen our ability to connect to our users' needs. They also help us prioritize our design goals so we can pick the most important pain points for our products to solve, unite the team around the website's main goals, inspire empathetic design decisions that are truly centered around the user's needs, and personalized pitches to stakeholders to better demonstrate how our design will cater to each persona's main pain point. To build a great user story, you'll need a well-researched empathy map and corresponding persona that relates directly to your product. Let's use Shane, our persona for our library website, to build an example user story. Shane needs easier access to check out books. Their pain points include having to drive to the library to check out books that might not even be available, and being unable to access the library outside of the library's operating hours. Using this info, let's build Shane a user story. Each user story needs a hero, a goal, and a conflict. In this example, Shane is our hero. We know one of Shane's goals is to reserve books on their schedule. And we've learned that one of the main pain points, or the conflict Shane is facing, is having to rearrange their busy schedule to reach the library in time to check out books before it closes. You might remember our user story formula from earlier videos, which goes, as a role, I want to action so that benefit. In this formula, role refers to the who, action refers to the what, and benefit refers to the why of our user story. So let's fill out the formula from the perspective of our persona Shane. As a busy professional and book lover, I want to be able to reserve books on my own schedule so that I know my book will be available when I drive to the library to pick it up. From Shane's user story, we can determine that our website design should allow users to place holds and check out books in order to improve their access to the library services. User stories empower us to design for our target users and their unique pain points. Rooted in research, these stories are an invaluable part of the design process and help us make products that meet users' needs. Coming up, you'll have a chance to create user stories for your own design project. I can't wait to see what you come up with. You're starting to really empathize with users and are developing a stronger understanding of who your user is. Now, let's talk about how we turn a user story into a user journey map. As a reminder, a user journey is the series of experiences a user has as they interact with your product while they want to achieve a specific goal. User journeys build off the personas and stories you've already created. They help you think and feel like the user, which is super important. If you can't put yourself in the user's shoes, you can't be sure your design will really help them. Think of it this way. Personas are the foundation of your design process to empathize with users. User stories focus on the pain points that your personas are experiencing. And the user journey provides additional details to build out specific user stories. Before you start the user journey, you need a journey map. A journey map is just what it sounds like, an illustration of what the user goes through to achieve their goals. Several benefits can come from building user journey maps. First, user journey maps can help create obstacle-free paths for users that solve their pain points as clearly as possible. Additionally, user journey maps can reduce the impact of designer bias, which you might remember as a tendency for the designer to design according to their own needs and wants, instead of the user's. Creating a journey map lets you thoroughly detail the user's interaction with your design. That way, you can really focus on how a specific persona, and not you, thinks and feels at every step. User journey maps can also highlight new pain points that your user might experience along their journey as they use your product. And finally, user journey maps can help you identify improvement opportunities that could streamline the user experience and ease your access to the product. So how do we map out a user journey? One action at a time. We use these 4 steps. Step 1, note each action that a user needs to take to reach their goal. Imagine our persona Shane. wants to check out a physical book using our library website. Shane needs to browse the catalogue of books, choose a book they're interested in reading, try to reserve the book, join a waitlist if the book is not immediately available, and then pick up the book from the library. Step 2, add descriptions for each action. Which tasks does our user have to complete? Well, for the browse the catalogue of books action, Shane might have to complete tasks like browse new releases, sort books by genre, and search for authors. You would add tasks like this for each action. I've gone ahead and completed this for our library website example. You can review this user journey map in more detail in the reading following this video if you're interested. Step 3, add how the user feels at each point. Guesstimates are okay in this step. For example, our persona Shane feels eager and inquisitive as they browse the catalogue of books. Then, Shane feels excited and optimistic that they can choose the book they're interested in reading. Similar to the last step, I've added feelings for each of these actions. And finally, step 4, add improvement opportunities. This is where we'd identify new ideas to improve each action in the user journey. For example, Shane's experience browsing the catalogue of books could be improved with the ability to select multiple filters at once. You can come up with lots of ideas for potential improvements to your design during this step, like I've done here. Awesome! Now we have a user journey map that we can use to design a practical and useful website that meets the needs of Shane and our other users. Next, it's time to take what you've learned here and build your own user journey map. Remember, your research is your guide, and don't forget to double check your assumptions. Good luck. Now that you've learned about your users and taken lots of steps to empathize with them, it's time to move on to the define stage. Let's use everything we've built so far to create a problem statement. As we previously discussed, a problem statement is a clear description of the user's needs that should be addressed. Great problem statements use human-centered language. It's also best practice for these statements to be broad enough to allow for creative freedom, but narrow enough to be solved by a design solution. Problem statements can be written using a simple formula. Start with the name of the user, add a short description of the user's characteristics, clearly describe the user's need, and explain why the user has that need. In other words, an insight about the user. Let's think about a problem statement for a library website and our persona, Shane. I use Shane's persona details, pain points, user story, and user journey map to create this problem statement. Shane is a busy professional and book lover who needs to easily find and reserve books online because they want their book to be available to pick up at the library. So what can we learn from a problem statement like this one? First, problem statements help us to establish goals. An effective problem statement tells us what the user really needs. Defining the goal clearly and concisely gets everyone on the design team on board and focused on the same thing. Second, problem statements help us understand constraints. We want to know what's keeping users, like Shane, from satisfying their needs. Third, problem statements help us define deliverables. When we finally solve the problem, what will we have to show for it? It's helpful to know what a design solution will produce. And finally, problem statements help us create benchmarks for success. Alright, now that we've reviewed how to build a problem statement, you can come up with a problem statement for your own project. Good luck entering the define phase. Congratulations on finishing this course from the Google UX Design Certificate. You can access the full experience including job search help and start to earn your certificate by clicking on the icon or the link in the description below. Watch the next video in the course by clicking here and subscribe to our channel for more from upcoming Google career certificates.